What do you got there around your wrist?
This is a prayer bead. It's like an Anglican prayer bead that a friend of mine, Kim, she actually makes this as a part of her contemplative practice. So the actual making of these beads is like her practice. So it's something that I find really calming, either when I'm praying or talking, sometimes even driving. Like I'll have it like on the steering wheel with me just to hold it.
Yeah.
Similar to like the Catholic rosary in a sense, similar to that, but it's sort of the Protestant version of it.
You mind if I take a picture of you holding it?
Oh, not at all.
Yeah, just the way you had it there.
Yeah.
Was really cool.
I like holding it this way.
Mm-hmm. Why did you decide to bring that today?
I decided to bring it because literally it has a grounding effect for me. Anybody who knows me pretty well knows I can be a rambling man. I can ramble on and on. This tends to remind me that I'm going to quote Rob Bell here, but he said, like, God has spoken and the rest is commentary. And these prayer beads seem to have that effect on me that remind me, hey, everything's already been said. I'm sort of providing a commentary, so I don't need to go on and on as if I could make a difference with what I'm saying. I can focus on that pretty much everything is said, and I'm arranging a commentary. So every time I touch it, every time I feel its weight, it reminds me that I'm just a part of something, that I'm connected to something bigger than I am, and that it's not up to me.
Whimsicast. Unpredictable encounters with voices from the unknown.
My name is Logan, and I'm 36 years old, and I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, lived a few years in Richmond, Virginia, before moving to Salzburg, Austria, where I grew up. And then my wife and I lived in Arkansas before returning to Richmond, Virginia. A friend of mine asked me the other day, about Austria, and he's an artist, so I feel very artistically inclined. And I said, it's really so beautiful, and it's a land of light and shadow. There's a lot of mountains, and there's a lot of trees. So there literally is a lot of forest and a lot of light and beautiful, lush green and mountains, but also a lot of shadow. And I think, artistically speaking, that is a metaphor that actually carries a long way. So that's also part of my upbringing in Austria. Not all of it was wonderful and bright, but most of it. My parents were missionaries to Austria, and my father specifically was a choir director and piano player. And so growing up like that, there was on the one side this sort of like, oh, I'm the exotic American, I went to Austrian school, Austrian public school all the way, so I was firmly in the culture, but I always felt like I was from the country of like David Hasselhoff and Knight Rider, which was a big hit back then. So I was sort of from that kind of Hollywood place, and so that was on the one hand, I guess sort of special, but for me, I experienced that a little bit as like something that sort of made me alien, something that made me not quite fit in 100%. And then also when I visited America and I visited grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles, I didn't quite feel like I fit in here either. So I think that's a part of some of the shadow that I carry with me, is that the concept of home has never been anything other than something that I'm jealous of. I feel like other people have a place they can go to, like a house or something where they grew up. And I literally don't. I hear the concept of home, but it's always been something that I've wrestled with. It's a split image. I have emotional ties that I can clearly distinguish to America and to my parents, being Americans, and my grandparents, and North Carolina, specifically Black Mountain. Ridgecrest area, where my grandma and grandpa lived on my mom's side. Then New Mexico. I feel home there. So very drastically different than the other split screen, which is Austria. I feel very at home in the Austrian culture.
What is it about the Austrian culture that you love so much? Like if you had to pick one thing.
Other than beer?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. There's a German word for it, Gemütlichkeit. And I wish there were an English direct translation, which there isn't, which is why I use that word. But Gemütlichkeit really has to do with comfort. But it's also like a philosophy sort of like how to live life and how to seek. And it's not just pleasure comforts. It's not just creature comforts. It's a holistic idea of how you're going to structure your quote unquote work week, play week, and how you structure all of that. Austria is a place that I received as like really being rich with stories and people knowing each other and being deeply rooted and a part of just, you know, long reaching stories into the past and a part of history in that sense.
Have you been able to find that at all in America?
Yeah, somewhat spotty if I'm honest, but there are portions of it there for sure. There's this definite sense that America is not as old. If America were a person, she's a young girl. She's beautiful. She's got great ideals, but she's still trying to find herself, sort of. And in that sense, man, who couldn't love her, right? But she also sometimes gets in the wrong crowd and then needs someone else to step in and protect and love her back into the empowered young girl that she is, if that makes sense, Lady Liberty in a sense. But she's young. She hasn't been around as long as Austria, if you will. But she has such high ideals, and she's just standing there, just wanting that. But I can't shake the sense of the American philosophy is sort of like, if René Descartes, if his philosophy is I think, therefore I am, I think it's fair to say that like the American philosophy is I win, therefore I am. And so there's this sort of, which is very different than the Gemütlichkeit. There's this sort of in order to have an identity, I have to be a winner. I have to win. And if I don't win, so there's this sort of frantic workaholism that I don't feel at home in the American culture. I don't mean that as a knock, because look at what that work ethic has created, right? So there's a lot of home about America too, but it's not quite the same. And when it comes to history, I think America could learn a lot from just looking at Austria and, well, specifically in this order, Germany and Austria, and how they incorporated the dark sides, like Hitler and the Nazis, and National Socialism and things, and the Holocausts, and how that is a very painful part, but it's a part of their history. You learn it. You go to Auschwitz and or any of the other concentration camps. Like, it's just, if you grow up in Germany or Austria, you know it. You can name it. It's a part of the history. You're not, yes, you might be ashamed of it, but you're not too ashamed to know it as a part of your narrative. And I think that makes communities have at least the possibility of being stronger. What I find in America is there is not a tie to the history. You have the myth of discovery, which is one thing if you're asking the people who came from Europe and came from England, and or Columbus, right? But if you ask the Native Americans, they might not call it discovery. They might have different words for what occurred. And I think being able to tell their story that way, in a full way, even the painful parts. If America continues on this path that you do find, it's not the biggest one, but you do find it. And if we can continue there and get a fuller history of who we are and what this place is and where we might be going, I think the best is yet to come.
Hello, Whimsicast listeners. This is Steven Sanders, producer of Whimsicast. And I was just wondering if you guys had checked out the Facebook page yet, or the Instagram page, or perhaps the Twitter page. Whimsicast is on all three of those platforms. We're usually posting different stuff on all those things, so If you're into the show, the main reason I have those pages to begin with is so I can be in touch with you. So if you type in Whimsicast on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, you're going to find us there. I was also really happy to receive 6 more iTunes reviews since the last show. If you haven't reviewed us yet, go ahead. And it doesn't even have to be a 5-star review. Maybe you think the show could be better in some way. That's the sort of thing that I'm looking forward to hearing back from you guys on. All right, anyways, let's get back to the story.
My parents, I remember sometime in the 90s, they got into the Enneagram as like a personality profiling system with some of the other missionaries there. And they were using it together on retreats and stuff like that. And I just remember being kind of fascinated by the shape of it. It's this sort of circle with these 9 dots and then this sort of 9-pointed star in the center. And then later on, as I was working in the north side here in Richmond with the church, my wife and I picked it up and began using it as a tool for our spiritual journey. And that's when, I really found it helpful and really encountered it for the first time. I guess you could say, before that, in the 90s, I was aware of it. So I knew where to look later on as I was looking for, is there a tool out there that is sort of custom made for spiritual growth, for the spiritual journey?
So for somebody who has never heard of the Enneagram before, just give me the basics.
So the Enneagram really is a system. It's a shape, first of all, that reveals a system that sees 9 different personality types. And that in essence, even though the world contains persons, we all have a personality type. And that, even though we're all very different, and at the end of the day, we're all persons, and you can't categorize a person, we all have personality traits that work to a certain degree, that go as far as it goes, but can't literally get us all the way to where we want to go. And the Enneagram actually helps you there as a system, helps you find out what you do all the time, what some of the motivations are, why you do it, and it helps reveal some of your blind spots or your chief, blind spot, and helps reveal it, but helps you integrate that into the whole picture instead of trying to get rid of it. Little footnote here: all 9 types are within every human being. So it's not like if I say I lead with a type 2, it's not like I don't have a 9 or I don't have a 1 or I don't have a 7. I have all of those things. It's just there is one type that is my operating system and that's running the whole program. It's like the chief feature. It's the algorithm that is making sense of everything else in my life. And because it's so automatic, I'm largely unaware of it. It's running the show. Like if you have glasses and you look at the world, you're not aware of the glasses. That's what it's like. So what the Enneagram helps you see is notice the glasses. And so for me, I lead with the type 2. I'm looking through the type 2. In the Enneagram world, that can be known as the giver. There's this sense of elation when someone special acknowledges you. It's also known as pride. There's this sense of I'm needed. And the way I do it, nobody else can do it quite the same way. I am needed. So the type 2 is the giver or the helper, I always like to think of it as like the quintessential Italian mama, in tune with everyone's needs, cooking up a storm. It's wonderful. It's welcoming. It's warm. You just want to be a member of that household. 2s do that naturally in the world. What we really want, what I really want, is to be loved for my inner self. But what I settle for is being appreciated. So in the Christian verbiage, if you will, that's my idol, is appreciation. And appreciation for what I do.
Now, there are also wings involved, what are called wings.
Right.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So the wings are the two numbers that are on the side of your number. So I lead with the type 2, which if you look left and right, there's the 1 and there's the 3. Now, what we mean by that you have a wing, is that one of those wings is what you lean on. So you'll either hear people say, I'm a 2 with a 1 wing or a 2 with a 3 wing. And what that means is, like a 3-legged stool in a sense, there's one of those legs that gets all the weight, and then the other one that helps it from not falling over, while the other one is sort of unacknowledged or just not as strong. My 1 wing shows up a lot, but not as much as my 3 wing. My 1 wing shows up as a perfectionist. I like things a certain way, and I have this inner critic voice that's really loud. Oh, you should have done that. You should have done this. Shoulda. The 3 is what I lean on. The 3 is what pays the bills sometimes. It's the performer. And by focusing on other people, so much so that I'm unaware of it, I perform a role within society, and I believe my own performance. And so that's really 2 with a 3 wing. That's me. Or another way of putting it, which might be helpful as a 2, I'm very concerned with it being helpful. That's my pet robot. The 2 with the 3 wing is what shows up when I don't. Noticing it is very hard, but noticing it really is the first motion. If you can notice that's what you're doing, then you begin to notice the lens. You begin to notice the things, and that's where it gets real juicy. There is something that I've noticed as the Enneagram is becoming more popular, which I think is a wonderful thing. Like I fan that flame. I think that is great. I really, really... A part of that I'm ashamed of, in a sense, is when it devolves or doesn't evolve, just stays stagnant as this sort of parlor game almost at a party, of wondering what the other person's type might be. So I don't mean to shame that, but there is this awareness of both change, like literally transformational change, and acceptance. That is so, completely different than just buying a book and picking it up and reading your type and your partner's type, and then like, and or your boss's type, right? And feeling, smug about that. Like there's this thing that, like, if you take it first and foremost as something that is for your own growth and your own change, and to help you become a better employee, a better partner, a better member of your community, by realizing the gift that you are and the ways that you undercut and or have blind spots, and being able to accept those as opposed to scapegoating them or trying to cut them out or get away from them. I think that really is what excites me most about the Enneagram becoming popular, is that we could take this work seriously of spiritual discernment, of spiritual growth, and see stronger communities, see much more happening than just like a parlor game or something new at the party that, if we're honest, most people find really damn annoying. For the right reasons. The person who brought the symbol to the West, George Gurdjieff, even said, what this symbol is all about is teaching you how to be a true Christian, or how to be a human being without quotation marks. And I think that's real true, sort of helping us realize what's here and how to be more present. And instead of the 9 different ways that we sort of are out having a barbecue in the back, that there really is always this presence knocking at the door, this loving, merciful, way bigger than we are, presence knocking at the door, wanting to have a meal with us, wanting to share life.
It's Steven again, and I wanted to invite you all to check out our SoundCloud page, specifically the Whimsicast Season 1 soundtrack. This playlist includes all the music from all the fantastic producers that have allowed me to use this music in the podcast. Quite frankly, I've been blown away by how many people have contributed to this project. If you're enjoying the podcast right now, trust me when I tell you that it would not be anywhere as good as it is without this music. Do me a favor, check out the SoundCloud page by searching Whimsicast. If you hear a song that you like, download or purchase that song. It would really mean a lot. Now, back to the story.
So, what are some resources that somebody?
Yes,
they're hearing this.
Yes,
they like personality tests. Oh, yeah. They're curious to see how this one differs from the others.
Yes.
What are some good resources that they can find really easily?
There is something called The Road Back to You, which is really great. It's a website. It's a podcast. It's a book, and they also offer free Enneagram testing.
I noticed that you brought some materials with you as well. I'm just a little curious why you brought those. Is there anything specific you wanted to talk about?
This is a book that I hadn't heard too much about called Parables and the Enneagram by Clarence Thomson. And I found that extremely helpful. He ties in just a very masterful way. He explores the Bible and the scriptures, specifically Jesus's parables. And he unpacks how they really are almost like Jesus was speaking to these 9 types in the form of parables and giving them wisdom for spiritual growth. And the introduction has this wonderful story that for me really anchors it. It really hits the heartbeat and what is at the heart, what's at the center of the Enneagram, which is that God loves us all of us, and that it's not something that we earn through performance or through getting rid of anything. And in that sense, that it's not that God punishes us for sin. That's not true at all. It's that we are punished by sin, if you will. I know not everybody's comfortable with that term. I don't even know if I am, but I do think there is something there which is a really big thing if you think of the 2 prepositions. I think a lot of people think that if there's a God, that one of God's job descriptions is to punish for sin. And the Enneagram, like nothing else, has taught me this beautiful truth that is absolutely BS. That is a belief system of sorts, but it's not helpful, and it's not a part of what is capital R real and reality and actually here. The presence, capital P, that is actually here is this loving, merciful presence that knows that every action has a reaction and or a consequence, and that instead of being punished for sins, change the preposition, we are punished by our own sins. And so this compassionate, loving presence works with us to integrate what we might call sin, what I would say, and I'm going to quote Father Rohr on this, sin is really just that which doesn't work. It's unworkable. It just doesn't work. It seems like it might, but it never does, and yet we keep doing it. It's unhelpful, but we keep doing it. And we're punished by that, in a sense, because it's frustrating, because it doesn't work. And the Enneagram says that what you do with those things in your life that just don't work is not try to get rid of them, but you notice them and you incorporate them. And they are a part, they are the other side of the coin, if you will, from your gift, which is the other side. And you can't get rid of your quote-unquote sin without getting rid of your gift. My type, for example, I'm a giver. If I try to get rid, once I notice, oh my gosh, pride is a sin. But if I try to get rid of my pride, then I also get rid of the presence that helps other people. And that is there, maybe somewhat altruistic, quote unquote, not quite, but somewhat seemingly altruistic, here not for me, but to help you. And there is an aspect of that is a gift to this world, and that is God-like. Not completely. There's an aspect of it that is completely selfish, because there's, it's like investing in something. There's a hidden motive of, if I help you, then now at some point you'll help me, hopefully too. There's this sense of that as well. But what it says is like, there are two sides of the same coin. This gift of being a helpful presence and thinking of the other person first is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not something we should take away from the world. And if I only try to take away my pride, then I lose that too. And I'm lost in the process. And so what the Enneagram helps you is notice it, work with it, and incorporate it. And don't let it run the show. If you're unaware of it, it runs the show. And other people notice, man, she is pretty damn prideful. And the only person who thinks I'm not prideful, I'm just here for everybody else, I don't have any needs, is the person who's flying the plane.
Yeah, you said there was a story in the parables in the Enneagram that painted a really beautiful picture of that.
Yes.
Could you read that story for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a king in Ireland. Ireland had lots of small kingdoms in those days, and this king's kingdom was one among many. Both king and kingdom were quite ordinary, and nobody paid much attention to either of them. But one day, the king received a huge, beautiful diamond from a relative who had died. It was the largest diamond anyone had ever seen. It dazzled everyone. The other kings began to pay attention to him, for if he had a diamond like this, he must be special. The people too came from far and wide to see the diamond. The king had it on constant display in a glass box, so that all who wished could come and see and admire it. Of course, armed guards, they kept constant vigil. Both king and kingdom prospered, and the king attributed all his good fortune to the diamond. One day, a nervous guard asked to see him. The guard was visibly shaken. He told the king terrible news. The diamond had developed a flaw, a crack right down the middle. The king was horrified and ran to the glass box to see for himself. It was true. The diamond was now flawed terribly. The king called all the jewelers in the land to ask their advice. They gave him only bad news. The flaw was in fact so deep, they said, that if they were to try and sand it down, they would grind it to practically nothing. If they tried to split it into two still substantial stones, it might easily shatter into 1,000,000 fragments. As the king was pondering these terrible options, an old jeweler who had arrived late came to him and said, "If you will give me a week with that stone, I think I can fix it." The king didn't believe him at first because the other jewelers were so sure that it couldn't be fixed. But the old man was insistent. Finally, the king relented, but said he couldn't let the diamond out of his castle. The old man said that would be all right. He could work there, and the guards could stand outside the room where he was working. The king, having no better solution, agreed to let the old man work. For a week, he and the guards hovered about, hearing scratching and gentle pounding and grinding. They wondered what he was doing and what would happen if the old man were tricking them. Finally, the week was up, and the old man came out of the room. Kings and guards rushed in to see the man's work, and the king burst into tears of joy. It was better. The old man had carved a perfect rose on the top of the diamond, and the crack that ran down inside now was the stem of the rose. not to get too philosophical there, but for me, faith literally has to do with trust. And in my life, I don't know if this is true for you, but I can imagine it is, as it is for most humans. Like, trust has to do with the other, and some other person. And so for me, faith has to do with, am I trusting the other? Am I trusting the other person? And some traditions call that God. Some, maybe, I don't know, call it energy or the source of all things, or, I don't know if there's obviously I am, way kind of biased in the sense that I don't think there's only one word for that. It's obviously way bigger than we are, but whatever that is, for me, faith is trusting that, and trusting that it somehow loves, and that it is love, and that we're a part of that. Yeah, it's a lot like breath when I think about it. I'm trusting that I can take another breath. I'm having faith that the next breath will be there when I go to take it. And I don't know if there's a Christian way of breathing, or a Catholic way of breathing, or a Hindu way of breathing. If that makes any sense, it's just, it goes down to the breath to me. And at that point, I don't know. I'm not able to say there's a Christian way of breathing, or so breathing is breathing.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Whimsicast, produced by Stephen R. Sanders. For more episodes of Whimsicast, go ahead and subscribe on iTunes or Google Play. You can also find us on Spreaker. Thanks.